Okay, so welcome to our second talk of the day. This is the infamous Brad DeMille. Every community needs a Brad DeMille because this guy gets things done. He does more in a day than most of us do in a week. So we are really fortunate that he has taken a moment out of his busy schedule to talk to us today about the rising cost of food. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Brad DeMille.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? There we go. Thanks for inviting me. I'm actually pretty impressed. You guys must have a fairly low standard here. This is great. I like that. A little higher? Okay, that's good. Part of what I do is I'm involved in the food community, not only buying local products, but buying imported. We don't export much anymore in the way of other towns. It just seems to have sort of shrunk that market a little bit, so we've concentrated on our local markets. What we've learned this year in food security, I believe, is quite alarming. Up like this? There we go. Okay, that's better, I can hear myself. What's happened, especially this year, or we can go rewind to maybe 2.5 years ago when COVID first started. Everyone was isolated to their own homes. They learned the art of baking again. They figured out where to buy yeast, which who knew, right? Everyone became somewhat of a traditionalist in the fact they're eating more beets, cabbage, potatoes, and these kinds of things. People were coming in buying 10 pounds of beets at a time that I would never have seen someone buy beets, maybe one or two at a time, and then probably rot in their fridge and throw it away. And this went on for about 6 months. And then once the economy started to loosen up again, we were allowed to not only leave our houses, but maybe leave town. That started to minimize a little bit of that flow. So the first part of COVID was quite good for grocery stores in that regard. When they first pushed on the inventory of the product that was in the store, I was talking with Warren on this, is that most grocery stores have a 2-day window on supply, basically in-hand inventory. During COVID, what happened was as soon as they shut the doors, a lot of those businesses saw a 4 to 10 times increase in their business, but their supply line didn't increase by 4 to 6 times or 10 times. What happened was a 2-day supply was now a 4-day window of product. If you weren't in there on the day or the morning of delivery, you did not get it. And you were not going to get it from that place until the next 2 days, and you had to go through the same exercise. That didn't end for about 4 months. Most of the grocery stores, and there's no slight on them because they do what they do, there's the balance of everything. Produce and locally sourced product is hard. It is hard to find great suppliers that aren't artists because a lot of the suppliers, especially they're kind of dreamers a lot of times. They'll plant this big field and expect it to all sell. Except for it all comes at once and then it dries and it rots and they have no market. And everyone else and their dog is available at the same exact time they are. So they've all made the same identical mistake. So when we talk to local suppliers, what we end up trying to do is guide them and meet with them prior to them growing their product to give them some expertise that they do not have in the fact of controlling your inventory of what you have available, spreading out your supply when it ripens. And it's not an exact science because anyone who's in the farmer's market knows, even though Tuesdays, Fridays, or Saturdays I'm supposed to go to this market, the vegetables may not know that. There's lots of impacts. It can rain, it can get hot, it can cold, it can do all kinds of things that are beyond their control. So what we saw is that a typical grocery store gets 90% of their product outside of the local chain. So when that supply ended, they had 10% left on their shelves. And when they ran out for the other 16 or 20 hours, that first 6 hours had everything, the next 16 hours had 10%. That's where they lost out. Our model, because we looked at a farmer's market as a challenge to our bottom line because they were competing for the same customers. We went to them and over the last 7 years, we said to these marketers, why don't you come sell to us 7 days a week, give us a bit of a break on your product, and we will market it and move it out 7 days a week, every day and every hour we're open. That gave them can't remember the exact number, but I think it's 93% more access to market than they had previously in the 2 days a week. In addition, it's under proper control, it's marketed well, and we've taught them how to grow and spread out their income stream. Most of these guys, and again, we were talking about where we have 184 fresh produce suppliers with canned goods also now, in addition to about 120 liquor and BC beer, wine, spirits suppliers now. So close to 300 different BC suppliers in one store. I think that's pretty cool. And it's taken us a long time to get to there. When we ran out of food during the whole COVID first 6 months, we still had 60% of our product on our shelves. And we had good supply because we could call the guy down Silver Creek and he would be there in an hour. That was different than a traditional grocery store model. It may not work for a grocery store model sometimes because it is hard work. Managing suppliers and a lot of suppliers, not just a fancy little order sheet that you get to tick a number off of and then the next day it shows up for you. We have to have personal relationships with all of these folks. They don't give us a spreadsheet that says, okay, I'm gonna order from this guy today and this guy tomorrow. My produce managers have to have personal relationships with over 150 different farmers and all their subset of product. It's very time consuming. And sometimes they're not very good at it. And we're getting them all better. So a lot of these farmers now, and we work with lots of folks in town, all the way Silver Creek, all the way to Vancouver and different places like that. We consider our local community still. A lot of them have seen between a 60 and 400% better sales by going to our sales point than they had just trying to one-off in a parking lot. I'm not additional on the farmers market because they have their space, and there's a reason why they're there. And it's very interesting. You sometimes get the best quality product you can get, sometimes not. Just like our place, we make mistakes all the time, but we're trying to have more successes than failures. By definition, that is successful. Some days it's like that. When you have challenges with COVID, the local supply chain was definitely taxed. What we've learned from that is that we are the last people and consumers that California, Oregon, and Washington are going to supply. Because when we're out of food, they're experiencing the same trend. And the trends coming out of California now are something that is going to be a complete effect on all of us in the future. We saw it this summer. One of the examples I'm going to give is they were paying farmers, instead of growing seasonal crops like corn, watermelon, potatoes, and onions, they were selling the water rights to their land. Let's say an acre foot of water was worth $20,000. So instead of planting watermelon, they were given a piece of paper to the almond growers, the walnut growers, the pistachio growers. Here's your permission to take my acre foot of water out of the reservoir. It wasn't a physical transformation. It was just a license to have that acre foot of water. Some of these guys have 1,000 acres, and they gave all of that water rights to the almond growers. An almond takes 32 gallons of water to make one almond. And these are permanent crops that have a huge investment in California. California is one of the biggest almond growers in the world. They make milk out of it now, which is, I don't support. They milk all kinds of things, but almonds, think of that, 32 gallons of water for one almond. And so the watermelon guy sold his rights. He made $20,000 an acre. If you have 10 acres, that's 200 grand. And you don't have to do anything. And he has a permanent right to that. So why would he ever do anything? I don't know if you noticed it, but before local watermelon came out, watermelon was between $1 and $2 a pound. There's a reason for that, is that a lot of the economy of shipping, if it's not going to be worth something, like the least amount of product cost per pound is corn, potatoes, watermelon, potatoes, I said, and onions. If you've noticed in the stores now, those values have almost tripled. A russet potato used to be 69 cents a pound, even 50 cents a couple years ago. That same potato is now $1.99. Because it's not because the potato is worth more money, it's because if it's not worth something, it's going to sit on the loading dock in California until it becomes a value that's worth displacing on that truck to get it here. What's more expensive than potatoes? Well, everything. What's more expensive than watermelon? Everything. Corn is probably the heaviest crop you can ship, but it's worth the least per pound. So unless corn's going to be worth $1 to $2 a cob, it's going to sit on the loading dock in Salinas, California, and they're going to ship strawberries and cantaloupes and these kinds of things. And it's just going to sit there. So it's not really that the potato and the watermelon are worth more money, it's the shipping that's worth more money. And the guy that says, I have 48 skids of room on my truck, what can we get the most value out of? Those stay on the loading dock unless there's more trucks. And we know there's not more trucks. And to come to Canada now, you're coming one way and going back with nothing. In the United States, the shipping is very cleverly done. They ship north, east, west, south, everywhere, and they're always full, going back and forth with their own product. So when you come to Canada, not only the hassle of getting here, the governance through new trucks and fuel taxes and levies and border patrols and stuff, I wouldn't want to come here either. And what we're going to see is more of that. You're going to see the cost to every consumer in here. You're going to see your food probably double in the next 3 years over what it has been today. There's going to be rolling shortages throughout the winter and ongoing. It's not going to be that we're going to have no food, but sometimes when you go for that luxury item, let's call it spring mix, you're not going to get it because the chef in Seattle got it all. You may be 2 hours away from Seattle at the border, but that's a long ways to come in a truck. So you're going to see those shortages, spinaches, basil, these fancy things we've all gotten used to. They're luxuries. They're luxuries that you may not have access to every day because they choose to eat them themselves. If we see food shortages in Canada, you can see it playing out in the United States also. It has to. My point is that when local watermelon came this year, the price went from $1.50 a pound back to 79 cents. And what's unfortunate is that we can't hold that price, so the grower and the guys who sell them can make a better profit on it. And we have to fix that part. Our expectation is that once it's local, it's cheap. That's not true. When we started selling blackberries this year, let's take blueberries for example. We were selling blueberries for $6.99 a pint from Oregon. They were going out the door like hotcakes. As soon as a 5-pound box came out of Mara or Chilliwack this year and they were $18, people were like, ooh, that's a lot of money. You gotta get your head around that because $18 is only $3.60 a pound. You were paying 2 weeks before that $10 a pound and you were happy because you had that little commodity. It doesn't make any sense. When local corn came out, we know that it was short this year. We were 3 weeks behind. There was no California corn that we had in at all this year, 0. We were 4 weeks without corn. When we did get corn, we got it from Texas, Georgia. Where else did we get it from? I think that was about it. And nothing from Washington because they grew all their own corn and kept it themselves. So when you come to Canada, you get, it's a penalty because you have to drive it up here and all the hassle you got to go here. So the governance on getting here is part of our problem also. The next part of our problem is that our expectation in our head is that we really need to expect to pay ourselves better. And to know that this stuff's gonna cost more money in the future, we need to start growing more of it ourselves and maybe get off the habit of these luxury items. When we started selling blackberries from the coast this year, we were $55 a flat for 10 pounds. That was $5.50 a pound. That price went up to $65 this year. It was a 15% increase. Not really a big deal until you told a senior citizen on a fixed income that they wanted to make blackberry jam and that's gonna cost you 65 bucks. Oh man, you changed her world. And this was the problem is that we couldn't explain that price to a lot of the clients that we had because you just don't have that kind of time. And a lot of the folks aren't educated on why your food's gonna cost you more money. If labor for a young kid walking in the door is $15.80, we start off our kids at $16.20. We had to string together because they only want to work 2 days a week. And it's tough, man. And each one of those kids, after 30 days, is entitled to 5 paid sick days off. Like seriously, who pays for that? Well, I tell you what, it's got to be in that blackberry price, and it's got to be in that blueberry price, and it's got to be in everything that we sell because I can't afford to absorb all of those increases, and it's all transferred to the consumer. We unloaded 400 bales of straw yesterday from Lumbee. It cost, last year's fuel cost for them was $55,000. No, sorry, $5,500 for their tractor fuel cost last year. This year, their fuel cost, same farmland, $12,000. Their fertilizer cost, I think he said it was $1,200 last year. He's pushing on $2,100 a ton this year. Who pays for that? Should it be the farmer? Or should it be the guy that buys the straw? Me. And who buys the straw after I buy it? Well, you do maybe. And your straw went from a giveaway 10 years ago at $3 a bale. My cost on straw is $10. It's got to be here. And when you show a bale of straw to an old timer that knew that we used to throw straw in the ditch and left it on the field and milled it into the ground, those days are now. I'm selling that straw for $15 a bale. It has to be there, because every time that anything goes through my till, it's 12% of that. So it's $1.20 just to ring it up. Not even the storage, the unloading, the risk, the warranty, all the stuff that goes through it. The levels of cost on everything are impacting your food. And unless you're prepared to pay more for it, it's considered a luxury item. Just like that $65 flat of blackberries. It is now not a right, it's a luxury item. You can buy it in a jar, and sometimes that might be cheaper in the prospect. But it's not as good. You don't know your origins of food. And a lot of the folks that buy stuff from us, you get it there. We've had a great tomato year, but we sold half the tomatoes of last year. Can we explain that? Yes, we can. Because during COVID, everybody bought tomatoes and canned. Now they have a pantry full of canning and they don't even eat it. Which is nuts. And so this year we found a lot of the canners, about half the amount that we sold was because everyone had enough canning probably to last them the next 2 years. We found the same thing when they put beets in a jar. They got enough canned beets to last them probably forever, because they probably don't even know what to do with them, honestly, at the end of the day. And we're finding these ebbs and flows like this, and what we're seeing is that we're catching up to our supply in our own pantry now. But we haven't learned to eat what is in our own pantry. We've learned to say we're doing all the stuff, just like when we have baking. I bet that yeast is still in most people's fridge right now, because they did it for a couple of days and went, this is a lot of work. And it's a lot easier to buy it off the shelf. All of our bread products are from Okanagan Bread Products, and what we do scratch built in the store. Most bakeries in grocery stores come with a frozen dough product that's made locally, mostly out of Armstrong, which is amazing. They do an amazing job, and it's all in Armstrong, actually that way. And what it is, we take a frozen bowl, thaw it overnight, and build it into all kinds of different flavors after that. It takes a lot of the inconsistency in it, and people should have access to those, and what we're trying to do is sell those frozen balls to people so they can be the baker at home without having to go through the yeast, the rising, all of the stuff that makes failure of a bread product. Because I don't know who's made bread before in this audience, but I guarantee if it looked anything like mine, it looked a lot like the tortillas I was making. But tortillas have no yeast, and my bread should have really risen, but it didn't. And I think most people have experience with horrible bread products. My point is that, I don't even know what my point was, but is that when you get to a shortage, you will run out this winter and this spring and ongoing. You will see some food shortages on your shelves consistently. You may see in every grocery store now, you'll see some sections very skinny. That's because we're just not getting supplied from outside sources. I think that's a real concern for us. A lot of the local farmers and local backyard guys that are doing stuff are doing an amazing job for us. And I think we need to encourage that. And I really believe there's a lot of room for that market. I think they could fill up where we're 60%, they could easily supply us 75 to 80% of what we need fruit-wise. We have to understand though, we live in winter, it's coming. And when it comes, like basically November on, we're vulnerable for supplies from California, Texas, Arizona, places like that, even Mexico. Mexico's done a really good job lately on bringing us product. It is a long ways to come. And the reason why a lot of those products are more money is that the tourists, when they go to Mexico, they usually fill the belly of a plane with the extra product. So when you didn't pay for that $50 bag, they put a half a pallet of product in the belly of that plane and get it to Canada. When we had no tourism, you had no pallets of produce in the bottom of a plane. You had to ship it by land, and it took forever. And again, shortage of trucks adds more cost. If you're gonna want it, you're gonna pay for it. And we're in Canada, you're going to continue to pay, and I think we're pretty lucky that we pay as little as we do currently. That is changing almost daily. So down the road, support your local farmers as seriously, and try to encourage your local government to put some programs in place, not only a bit of a tax break, and honestly our council has been very supportive of our market and very supportive of local farms in general. What we need to do is maybe get off the provincial pocketbook and encourage this. The ALC was designed to secure land for farming. In I think it was 1980, 70 something, they kind of forgot to do that. They were supposed to actually help and subsidize farming. They kind of thought that was expensive, so they don't need to do that part of it. We're just going to freeze the land and make it impossible for you to do anything for it. And you have to actually do it. Water is going to be a concern going forward. And if we've seen how dry it's been for the 2 months and plus, you're going to see that cycle even worse. I think that wraps up. I'd like to say that the local governments, again, have been supportive, but I think they could do more. I really do, and I think that putting programs in place for young farmers, taking the onus off of them not to own the land, but maybe take some of these lands that are vacant and encourage them and give them a break and give them some water resources to use to get this stuff done. I will give you a market, you grow it, and I'll try and sell it. So any questions for anyone?
International events, war in Ukraine, how is that impacting the global movement? Yeah, I'm just wondering about the global movement of goods and how events like the war in Ukraine is impacting what we're seeing in Canada.
I think the biggest single factor of the war in Ukraine is, number one, fuel costs. Impacts everything you touch. Everything we do has to be supported by some kind of getting it here. It's tough to get it here by a donkey, but the donkey ate something that made hay by a combine that was run by fuel. This impacts everything. If you look at fuel, where we were about, what, $1.35, and we went to, what, $2.10, and now we're, what, $1.69. We're pretty happy with that now. I'll say, whoa, we're so happy it's cheap. No, it's not. And that's definitely had layers of effect on everything you've touched. And everything from transportation to labor to getting someone to work. They want to be subsidized for driving more than 10 miles. And there's conversations about this, paying staff, mandatory payment for staff that drives over 10 kilometers to your job. Like crazy. Like, I don't even know how that conversation started. I guess you deserve it, but you still chose the job. But now we have such low staffing levels. Every industry is seeing it, from highest paid like hygienists, dentists. There's just no people. And I don't think this is a temporary problem. I think the shortage of labor, again, with Ukraine, may not be a sideline, but we're seeing it's not a 2-year problem. They're saying it's a 30 to 50 year shortage of people, because with the baby boomers retiring, they go and there's nobody to replace them. We don't make enough kids, apparently, to support the older people that are retiring, like me next. So hopefully I get out on time. But the Ukraine thing has been horrible for everyone. I think that the psychology of it is insecurity overall. I think everyone's a little bit stressed from that, and they should be, because that's spilling over every day, not only in our politics, but in the way the politics govern us. And I think we should all pay really close attention to what's happening, and not only provincially, federally, United States, and internationally. I think we really need to be aware of what's happening there. So hopefully that answers some of your question.
Sorry.
I have a question about why it is that we haven't moved any further in what would be, from my recollection, almost 10 years in terms of moving towards supporting programs for young farmers, utilizing land. I sat on a panel. I want to say it's almost 10 years ago. It was funded and hosted by the CSRD. There was some lovely fellows like John McDonald that went around the area. There was an inventory done of land. So far as I know, there was a proper inventory done of all fallow land, all land that could be utilized that way, and that those were the plans. And so I guess what I want to know is it just inaction by area governments that are preventing us from moving forward on these things?
That's a good question. I think that we've lost a lot of skill set in our young people. The farmer that I was at one point, when I was a young kid growing up, we would get out and haul hay and go and do our chores and go pick corn and do all the stuff we were supposed to do. I'm now a retailer. I farmed a little bit yesterday with 400 bales of straw. It wasn't very much fun. And I think that we've lost some skill set in the ability for people to be connected to the land that they do. The passion, because it's not easy, is easy to lose. And I think, not that we're lazy, but we're certainly not as productive as our parents were. And I don't know if it's a society thing with too much information on your cell phone and too many other distractions to have, but I think the passion for farming is not what it used to be in the interest. I think once people get a little hungry, like really hungry, you're gonna wonder what happened. And I think that we've lost that skill set, and it takes a long time to recover that, because we make a lot of mistakes growing product. Weeds are always there. You let your guard down. A buddy of mine bought a lot in town here, and this lady had a 20-year garden, beautiful garden. Took him 1 year to ruin it. Weeds everywhere. So the whole time that lady had that 20-year garden, oh, you think there's not a weed in it? Give it a few minutes. I'm gonna turn my back. And it's hard, because in corn we have weeds that grow up. They're very invasive. Grass strips 90% of the nitrogen out of the soil, so the corn can't grow. The corn won't even come up. It won't even produce anything. We're seeing that talent. I know that. But do you know that? And that's where you plant a seed. That's the easy part. And this is where the understanding is that once you plant it, that's done. That's where the work begins. Fertilizing it properly, and then there's distractions on man-made fertilizer and chemicals and stuff. We gotta be careful we don't starve ourselves with too many regulations, because this is kind of where we're going. If we don't create crops that are sustainable, not only just with natural fertilizers, but when we have to, we got to get stuff in our food banks and feed the people, because hungry people are not happy people. And I think that if we can work on that, investing in our young people to teach them a passion to do it. I don't know if government's responsible for everything, because I think everything starts grassroots. I think what we've done locally here with the Food Action is a great way to go. In COVID times and stress times in economies, I think volunteerism is probably at its lowest point we've seen in 10 years. Getting someone to do something for nothing for you, it's getting harder. Especially when you have to drive from Blind Bay to volunteer to do something for free with my gas. You're thinking, I'm gonna just stay home today. And I think you get that cost. I don't know if there's a remuneration programs for that, but it does cost you money to leave your house. And I think people are reevaluating their trips and they're going to those markets. We become, in our market especially, we become more of a European shopping model. A lot of the men are doing the shopping. They'll come in, they'll buy 1 or 2 days of product for those 2 days, and they'll come back in a couple days. We're smarter that way. My mom used to load up the Dodge Coronet station wagon, I swear, once a month at the end, and we'd load this thing full of box garbage, just lousy food, except for the vegetables we grew, and we wouldn't have to go back to the grocery store for a month. That's changed in Canada, and I think it's important to have fresh markets, what we're doing, and if we can get the young people out, and I don't know how much government can do, honestly, because it's just hard, because it doesn't seem like they listen, and they don't listen fast enough. To put something on the back burner like Food Action into like a mediocre kind of interest to it, maybe they should get a little hungrier, I think, and then maybe we'll have a little more action. And you know what, if I want a kid to come and help me, I have a couple of young kids that started this year. They couldn't find the trigger on the drill to put a screw into a board. They were lost. That talent, that skill was not instilled to them. Now, not only can they put a screw into a board, they know how to start a weed whacker, they know how to mix fuel to run it, they know how to change the twine in it, they know how to repair a hay bale without abandoning it. we need someone to lead these guys with some skills to where they can sustain themselves. Because I tell you, when it stops being, when you start being hungry, you better learn quick. I think that's probably the best thing. Be a quick learner and be open to that. Not just on your phone, but actual physical hand skills of doing stuff. And I think that's where we need to get them out and actually get something done. Hope that helps.
When you want policy about land costs, that can get young farmers on.
You know what's funny is that I have a okay successful store that runs, and we hire a lot of people, and we make great employable people when we're done. It's not like a puppy mill or anything like that, but we give them a great work experience, give them support, treat them with respect. What we would like to see, okay, all that success, I still can't afford to buy my dad's farm. So if I can't afford to get it, who's gonna buy it? Is it gonna be an inheritance thing? Well, I don't want anything for free, but I can't afford a $4 million farm. It's just not in the cards. And it's, where does that come to? Who gets to afford that $50,000 an acre, except for a land developer, someone that doesn't have our food interests? And if we sell it to the wrong people, just like our peaches in Lower Okanagan, most of those peaches have all been cut down now. They're all either in wine grapes or cherries. Who owns the grapes? Who owns the cherries? Chinese interest groups. They control over 90% of the wine and the cherry orchards in Lake Country now. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but they're the only ones that can afford to buy that land. We need better programs that are going to get us on the land, and maybe some of this static land that's like on here on the edge of Piccadilly Mall. That's been a grass, useless field for as long as I can remember. They were going to put the Okanagan College there. And the excuse was at the time that, oh, it's good agricultural land. For what? Nothing that I've ever seen. I don't even think I've seen a cow on there for as long as I can remember. So I think what we need to do is the land that's open, we should come up with a think tank on how to get it to produce something. Because I'll guarantee you it's going to be fertile land, but you're going to need water, you're going to need electricity, and you're going to need a lease. Who can afford that without a good business plan? And I don't think the credit union is giving out money for free lately. So, and as interest rates go up, it's going to be harder. Your access to money is going to get tighter, not easier. And I think that's a challenge we're going to have to look at, because the guys who own the land have land tax liabilities they need to do. To put something in ALR land, you have to have a certain amount of production on that land to get your agricultural status. Those are hard things to do. And I think there's certainly a conversation to be had about having land that's available to us without some of the rules and the strings. And maybe at $50,000 to $100,000 an acre, we can find a way that we can get together and finance it, and not just run around like we all have a 5,000 square foot house. We could probably all live in a 1,000 square foot house. So would it make sense that 5 families could have a house of 1,000 feet instead of one person having 5,000? It's the same as having someone have 1,000 acres and no one else can afford it. I think we need to rethink that a little bit. I think we're going to have to come to that point pretty soon. So.
And just on talking of young farmers, we actually have young agrarians at 1 o'clock. But I want you to come and ask your question.
You were already saying what I was going to say. I hear a lot of people talking
Oh,
about
yes.
land prices, right? And the young agrarians.
So we have Tessa from Young Agrarians, and she's going to be talking about that awesome organization. Is there any other questions? So, yeah.
Sorry, Brad, I might have missed, you might have touched on this, I got here a little bit late. But just about food affordability and the prices, and we're all concerned about paying 8 to 10% more for food right now. But I'm also looking at what it's costing to produce food. I'm trying to start a bit of a farm and grow food, and what I'm learning more than just about how to grow things is what's involved and the cost. And what I'm learning most is there's no way I could support my family at current food prices. So I agree, we need to be producing more food locally, but how do the current food prices do not allow somebody to live in Salmon and raise a family on what I'd be producing. So there's this sort of paradox that the vast a lot of us are looking at affordability of food and where prices are headed. Lots of families won't be able to afford food, but those of us who are trying to produce food can't live off of what we can make. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on how do we improve food sustainability locally with where prices are at? And my concern is that even though we're concerned about the price going up and what we're currently paying, I think it's actually artificially low, and the prices that we're paying at the grocery store are entirely dependent upon some form of exploitation, whether it's exploitation of cheap labor in impoverished countries on the other side of the planet, and then exploiting the climate, burning cheap oil to transport it on ships from halfway around the planet. I'd like to see that stop, and I'd like to eat locally, but is it affordable? And what are your thoughts on all this? I'd like to hear.
Well, I think if we get used to it, years ago we never had fresh lettuce and cabbage was a luxury that wasn't stored in Okanagan. We have a pretty expensive diet in the wintertime that we've been lucky that it's been cheap. That's changing. And the reason it's changing is because we've been subsidized by, again, too low a fuel cost, the labor that was cheap from Mexican transit labor in California producing all this stuff. The cost of California, I mean, they're 115 degrees today. You can't grow anything in 115 degree heat, and it's all the way up to Sacramento, San Jose, which is where I get my oranges from. It affects everything. And Florida had its worst orange crop in 50 years last year, and we're going to see the same thing this year. I believe, and I've said this for many years, that we've been eating cheaper than we should be, and it's catching up. And this is why it's on top of your mind, because honestly, I think that we're catching up, and now we're aware of it. We've been sleeping, and we had a chance, and we still have a chance. There's going to be some growing pains in all that we do, but you're going to also have to adjust your taste in the wintertime. You get used to eating beets, rutabagas, and cabbage, and potatoes again, which is not the horrible thing, and treat your lettuces, your spring mix and stuff a bit like a luxury for a while, until we figure out how to get stuff grown using not only either natural gas or solar, or somehow we get them available in the wintertime. We have lettuces that we grow in Armstrong now that's available all year long. They're $3 a head. They're kind of small. They look like a plant like this. And that's the reaction, is that they almost like it's going to bite them when they see a $3.50 price tag on it. If you don't pay it, you're not going to eat it. And you're going to have to get used to those shortages, because it's going to be a luxury item. And I think that eventually you will get used to that price. Today's in your head, it's going to be that price. Your kid may see it as, this is affordable. And you got to make sure their income goes up to support that, and our other costs, because like tractors, all this stuff is expensive, and I don't know how to fix it. We don't get anything typically from China at all that's edible, or let's say overseas. That's probably a more political way to say it, but because I don't trust the food, I would never eat it, and I disallow it to be sold in my store. It's as simple as that. There's no Chinese mandarin oranges, there's no Chinese garlic, there's no ginger that's not from either Peru or Hawaii. That's just what we do. And I think if more people make those choices and stand for what is the right thing to do, not just what makes those 3-pack garlics an income stream. It costs them 75 cents to sell for $3. You could probably make your mortgage payment on that, but I wouldn't eat anything in that package. And I think that as retailers, not only myself, but grocery stores in Canada need to make a solid decision to commit to buying more local. Not just the poster on the wall that says, I bought this cucumber one time, we caught this guy's picture. We need to do it every day and sincerely believe that we're going to do it, and to put the facilities in place to actually continue to do it. And you guys are helping with that, so. And I'm glad, hopefully I can help a little bit.
Is it much cheaper for him to move somewhere else though and do all this?
I don't think you can live anywhere better, and honestly, we'll find a way to make a living for you.
There was one grower at the farmer's market, and she had beautiful produce. But she said, don't ever do this. But she added up all the hours that she spent growing, and her costs, and what she made the previous year. And she was making around $3 an hour.
$3 an hour from a farmer, and I hear that, and to be honest, I am, in our farmers market, we have lost 3 farmers in the last 2 years from the profession who quit farming because they couldn't make a living, and we have lost 2 farmers to Nova Scotia, which apparently is still affordable. So my friend just bought a farm in Nova Scotia, 10 acres, $250,000, and there's a house on it. And I know two farmers from the Shuswap in the past 2 years who have moved to Nova Scotia. Yeah, so please don't move to Nova Scotia. All this to say is the cost of land is a serious problem, and farmers need to be able to make a living wage for people to do it, and these are things that we are both aware of, and looking into strategies. But I just want to thank Brad. It's always a pleasure to have Brad come in because he's Brad. He's very unique part of the community, and we love him. So thank you, Brad. And we do have a gift from BC that you don't sell in your store, but maybe you will after today. So thank you, guys. And next we have Tessa.